All right, so we're talking about absolute value. And when I teach absolute value, I always talk about how many jumps away a number is from zero. Absolute value is always the distance a number is from zero. And it's important you say it like that because distance can't be negative. So when you talk about absolute value, it's important that you're paying attention to those negative signs because these are what we call absolute value bars. These bars on the side of the number. So you would say this right here as the absolute value of 6. So if I ask you to find the absolute value of 6, in other words, I'm saying how many jumps away is 6 from 0. So think about being on a number line. All right, you start at 0 and you take jumps until you get to 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the absolute value of 6 is 6 because that's how many jumps it took me to get there. You always start at 0. And no matter what direction you go, you're just counting how many jumps it takes to get there. So now I mentioned negative numbers. So if I said the absolute value of -4, okay? I'm starting at 0, but instead of going this way, I'm going this way, okay? Because I'm going to -4. So if I start at 0, I'm counting how many jumps do I make until I get to -4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So the absolute value of -4 is actually 4. And the reason that is because, yes, I was going in the negative direction, but I still made 4 jumps. It's not like you can make negative jumps because even if I jump backwards, I've still made a jump. Okay, so absolute value most of the time is going to be positive because those jumps cannot be negative. Okay, distance can't be negative. Like I said, even if you drive your car backwards the whole way to Raleigh, you've still traveled somewhere, you've still covered some distance, so it is still going to be a positive amount. Okay, so let's do one more before we look at some examples. So if I gave you, let's see, absolute value of -2, okay, so if I start at 0 and I make jumps until I get to -2, well then how many jumps did I take? I went 1, 2, so the absolute value of -2 is +2. Okay, let's look at some different examples. Let's say they give you this one and they ask you to compare these two numbers. Okay, so in other words, I'm going to be putting an inequality sign in between them. All right, so absolute value of -6 and the absolute value of 15. Okay, the absolute value of -6. So once again, I'm looking at my number line. Start at 0, how many jumps would I have to take until I got to -6? That would be 6. Okay, same thing for the 15. If I'm on the number line, how many jumps would I have to make until I got all the way to 15 on the number line? And that would be 15. Okay, so don't get absolute value and opposites confused because they're not the same. Okay, absolute value is always how many jumps it takes to get to that number. So now you're just comparing these two numbers, 6 and 15. Which one's greater? Well, obviously the 15 is greater, so therefore my alligator eats that one. Okay, let's look at another example. The absolute value of -3 plus 7. Okay, so let's address this right here since this is my absolute value one. So absolute value of -3. So look at your number line, start at 0. How many jumps do I have to make before I get to -3? 3. So now I have 3 plus 7, and you just have to solve that, and obviously you get 10. Okay? So those are the pretty straightforward ones, but then of course the test is always going to throw something at you that you're not expecting, and that's this right here. So this one's a little bit different because it has a negative on the outside. Okay, there's a negative on the outside and a negative on the inside. So what I like to tell my students is that picture these absolute value bars kind of like as your house. Okay, I can control whatever negativity goes on inside my house and I can just get rid of it. Okay, but outside my house, which is this right here, I can't really control that. I can't control what goes on in the world, so I can't just get rid of this negative. So inside of my house, like up here, this negative was inside my house, I can get rid of it and make things positive. But in this one, I can get rid of this negative because if it was like this, the absolute value of -8 would just be 8. because it would take me 8 jumps to get to -8, okay? But this negative out here, I can't just get rid of it because it's not in my house. I don't have control over it. So unfortunately, that negative has to come with it, and it becomes -8. So the only time an absolute value question is negative, or when the answer is negative, is when that negative is on the outside, because you can't get rid of it. You can't just make it go away like you can on the inside of your house. All right, so let's look at one more example. So this one, similar to the last one, but this one doesn't have a negative on the inside, just on the outside. So if you're just looking at this, the absolute value of 9. So if I start at 0, how many jumps do I have to make before I get to 9 on the number line? And that would be 9. Okay? But remember, this negative is out here. I can't get rid of it. I can't control it. I can't control the negativity going on in the world. So unfortunately, it just comes with me. Okay? This one over here, this one's inside my house. I can control it. I can get rid of the negativity. So if I'm on 0, how many jumps do I take to get to -1? Well, that would be 1. Okay? So now I'm just comparing. If these confuse you, just get rid of those. Look at these two orange numbers. I'm comparing these two numbers, -9 and +1. Which one is bigger? Well, a positive is always bigger than a negative.